Leadership Reimagined, where game-changing conversations are reshaping the world of work. I'm Janice Ellig, the CEO and founder of Ellig Group, Executive Search Advisors, where we are reimagining search through our long-standing commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. On today's episode, Defining Leadership as a First-Time CEO, I am delighted to welcome our special guest, Kristen Peck, Chief Executive Officer of Zoetis, a Fortune 500 company and a global leader in animal health, with $6 billion in annual revenue and more than 450% shareholder return since its IPO in 2013. She was appointed CEO of Zoetis in January 2020 after she served as the company's Executive Vice President and Group President, U.S. Operations, Business Development, and Strategy. Zoetis was previously a subsidiary of Pfizer until the spin-off in 2013 and remains a completely independent company with more than 6-decade-old history and a singular focus on being a global leader in animal health. After spending her early career in business consulting, she joined Pfizer, where she became Executive Vice President, Worldwide Business Development and Innovation before leaving in 2013 with the Zoetis IPO. Zoetis has an award-winning culture, has been named one of America's best mid-sized employers by Forbes, and under Kristen's leadership, named one of the top 75 companies for executive women by Working Mother Media. And in her very first year as CEO and during a global crisis, she ranked 15 on Fortune's 2020 Business Person of the Year list. Kristen, thank you for taking time from your busy schedule to join us here today.
Well, thank you, Janice. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, I often say in the search business, you should be working for a company or on its board where you're passionate about its mission and direction. And certainly that fits you because you've had a passion for animals from a very early age. So can you tell us about that and how it began?
Animals have always been an important part of my life. Even as a little girl, my family always had at least 2 dogs, sometimes 4, 1 or more cats, birds, and my family actually raised horses, Morgan horses, and my sister rode and actually made it to national final. So whether I was going to rodeos my dad produced or going to horse shows with my sister or mucking out stalls, animals were definitely a key part of my life. In fact, my first job in high school was for a company called American Equine Products, which, as luck has it, is actually a legacy Zoetis company. You could say I was destined for this job from the beginning, but to be perfectly frank, I don't think I could have imagined at such an early age what a career in animal health might look like. It has been more amazing than I ever could have imagined.
Well, you're certainly living it daily today and through the pandemic as well. But for those who are not as familiar with Zoetis, could you give us an overview of the business and your focus and the strategic direction?
Zoetis makes vaccines, medicines, diagnostics, nutritionals for pets and for farm animals around the world. So pretty much if you are sitting listening to this podcast on your couch with your dog or your cat, or you drank a glass of milk this morning or had some eggs, we've affected your life in some way. About half our business is in the pet care side. The other half is in the livestock side. We are, as you mentioned, the world leader with over $6.3 billion in revenue. We have 10,000 colleagues worldwide, and we operate in over 45 markets. And we really believe our purpose as a company, our business purpose is a social purpose, which is to nurture the world and humankind by advancing care for animals. So that's sort of who we are as a company and how I think we really do touch lives around the world.
So let me ask you, between the U.S. and overseas markets, what's the percentage split on that?
We're about half in the U.S. and about half of our revenues are outside the U.S.
So truly a global company.
Yes.
And here you are, your first year as a CEO, and you take this on during a crisis, and you've kept the business on track domestically and overseas. You've been resilient. Your stock performance is maintained. There's been profitable sales growth. But what are some of those major challenges you faced and the critical decisions that you had to make along the way to navigate through this pandemic?
When the pandemic came, and the first signs of it for us, certainly China's our second largest market, came in January. I don't think we ever could have imagined what it would turn into. But first and foremost, the biggest challenge was ensuring our colleagues' safety. And that has remained our number one priority throughout. Our approach and our principle is colleagues need to be safe and feel safe. So not just make sure we do it, make sure they feel that way. And that's been incredibly important with 70% of our workforce moving remote across the globe. But we still have 30% of our workforce that needed to remain safe in manufacturing facilities and distribution facilities to make those vaccines, those diagnostics that were so necessary, and to ensure reliable supply to our customers. I would say the second challenge, and I always see challenges as opportunities, was the virus and the pandemic was felt differently in different markets around the world. And how you manage a workforce, if it's a sales force or a site, are quite different. So the second real approach we had was that we would have global guidance, but locally led. And that was really focused on empowering our local leaders. And I think one of the benefits that maybe we hadn't thought of at the time when we implemented the approach of global guidance locally led is that made us more adaptable as a company and more agile to meet the different needs of our customers and of our colleagues throughout. We obviously moved to much more online and virtual meetings with, not just our colleagues, but our customers, leveraging e-commerce, investing in our digital evolution significantly, and really thinking differently about our supply chain. Ensuring we could get products in and out of China in the first quarter, as you might remember, was actually quite challenging. But, that was really important for us. We also changed how we thought about inventories to make sure that we could keep a reliable supply. Back to the point we made before, Janice, 50% of our business is livestock. And that meant in the pandemic, ensuring there was a safe, affordable food supply on people's tables throughout the world. And so this was really important to us, and we're quite proud of how we did that. And really at the end, it was anchored in our purpose, which is to nurture the world and humankind by advancing animal care. And we've always felt strongly about our purpose, but I would say throughout the pandemic, it remained really important guiding light for our colleagues.
Yes, and you refer to your employees as your colleagues, and very purposefully, I understand. Zoetis has been voted as a great place to work, one of the top 75 companies for executive women by Working Mother Media. I've heard you say on other podcasts that it's about our culture and our people. We accomplish what we do through our colleagues, valuing the entire person, both personally and professionally. I quote you on that. How has that belief formed the way you actually lead the company with policies, practices, performance metrics? Because as a leader, you set a tone that is very clear and it's resonating in the company. But how has that made you a better leader, and how have you actually manifested that, demonstrated in the company?
It is really important to me as a leader, and I would definitely say to Zoetis as a company. And I think it starts with the really, one of our core beliefs is our colleagues make the difference. They come here for the purpose for who we are. But I really think our performance and beating market growth continuously and delivering, over 450% total shareholder return since inception really is because we've allowed our colleagues to bring their full selves to work. I think when they can be their expanded self and challenge ideas and innovate and not just show up, but strive, there's very little, in my view, that a company cannot achieve. I'm also a firm believer that to have a delighted customer, there has to be an engaged colleague on the other side of that transaction or relationship. An engaged sales force is listening differently to its customers. It's making sure they can meet those needs. It's giving feedback, to different divisions of the company on how we can, further delight those customers. And when you have delighted customers, you have a profitable and sustainable business. If you believe that, if that is a core belief, which it is for us, one of the 5 for us as a company, then you have to measure it and ensure you do it. So we've measured engagement since our very inception as a company. We have a world-class engagement in the high 80s to 90 over the last few years. But beyond just measuring engagement, it's investing in two-way communication, which, we've consistently done with these surveys. But it's also about thinking differently, not just, surveys. It's about podcasts. It's about videos. It's about emails and two-way emails. I respond to every email that I get from every colleague around the world personally, not someone on my team. I do. And I think that's part of our culture at Zoetis. And then lastly, I think we also invest in programs, policies, benefits that demonstrate to our colleagues that this is important. We have to also be willing, as we learn new things, to evolve those benefits and policies. So for example, through the pandemic, we, really advanced some of our benefits in things like childcare and elder care and really enhanced what were already, I think, strong policies. We've enhanced our tuition reimbursement. But most recently, we've also really been investing in well-being. How do we think about the mental health of our colleagues and what that looks like? I think a colleague has to be able to share, their great days and their challenges and believe the company's going to have their back throughout. And that's been incredibly important since our inception. And certainly in the pandemic, we found new ways to invest in that.
Well, it seems like you've really gotten that communication to your colleagues going? Because I agree with you that if you put employees or colleagues first, then that impacts your customer, it impacts the communities that you're serving, and therefore it's shareholder returns and values. But you have to start with your colleagues. So I commend you for that. You know, you are a company with an executive team of 50% women and a board with 4 women and diverse directors. So there's a really strong tone at the top for an inclusive and equitable environment, which is not, I would like to say it's more common in corporate America, but it is not. So you have a unique position. What are those implications for that representation? How does that, cascade down through the company and into the communities and with investors?
We are fortunate, to exactly your point, Janice, that we've had a legacy of a diverse leadership team, which my predecessor, Juan Ramon, built. We were 50% women even before I took over, just to be clear. And it was important to Juan Ramon, and it was important to our board. And I think that it goes back to what we were talking about before. If our core belief is our colleagues make the difference, having a culture where everyone can thrive and succeed, they feel valued, heard, respected, is incredibly important, because the challenges that our business, and I think honestly all businesses are facing, are really difficult and they're challenging. And I think if you want to innovate and you want to beat your competitors, being able to really think differently about the challenges you face is incredibly important. And so having a diverse set of colleagues help you do that. We also serve diverse communities. And I think it's important that our colleagues reflect the communities that we serve. So a greater range of voices at the table, I believe, helps Zoetis innovate and continue to lead in a world where, the pace of change continues to grow. And one of the things since I took over is investing more in DE&I. Investing in colleague research groups, more of those, investing in new benefits, and really thinking differently about partnership with our communities. You've talked a lot about, in some of your questions, about the impact that colleagues and customers have on their communities. And we've announced new partnerships with groups like Inroads and MLT to make sure we continue to do that. Because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that Zoetis supports equity of opportunity within Zoetis and within the communities that we serve.
And those communities that you serve, you're saying that's global as well, Kristen, right? In terms of how you're investing in those communities.
Absolutely. And obviously, what does diversity look like? That may change globally. But we firmly believe that an inclusive culture is relevant globally. Making sure that someone can bring their full expanded self to work every day is relevant no matter where you are. I mean, obviously, the diversity metrics that we've launched in the United States, we announced over the summer where we currently stand and what our aspirations are. We are one of the first animal health companies to do so. But I do think as you look at inclusivity and a culture where people can bring their full selves to work is really a global concept.
That transparency of publishing that, I think, is so important for shareholders, employees, and communities to see that. So congratulations on that. So who helped shape these very strong company core beliefs? And would you share those words that you have as your core beliefs? Because you say that those beliefs, those values are driving the behaviors. And I commend you for what you've done in terms of promoting those core beliefs. Can you comment on those?
We're splitting off from Pfizer back in 2013. We started a global grassroots effort. One of the exciting things as we were splitting off is we got to determine our own culture. And when we were part of Pfizer, obviously animal health, as you probably see from financials, performed very well, but we weren't as relevant to the overall Pfizer, obviously given our size. So we wanted to make sure that when we split off, that we built a culture and a set of values that were relevant to our industry and to the people and culture that we thought we needed to succeed. So we did a process around the globe that actually took us many months, so we didn't have them right away, to form what we thought were core beliefs. And our thought around that was to choose our language intentionally that was unique to our company and that we thought would make people engaged, want to be here, have purpose and matter. And so I've clearly talked about one of those, which is our colleagues make the difference. The second was customer obsessed. So we weren't focused on, we wanted to be obsessed. We were the first independent public animal health company, of any size. And we were proud of that. And we didn't want to just focus. We wanted to be obsessed. The next thing is to run it like you own it. And this was really interesting splitting off from Pfizer, where, the joke was when we hit 4 billion, could we get more than one sentence in their earnings press release? Things we did before didn't matter. Everything we did now mattered. Every colleague at every site around the world mattered. So let's run this company like it's ours, because it is. The next one obviously was to do the right thing. We're making products that go in animals, whether they be our pets or whether that turns into food on our table. What we did mattered, and we had to always do the right thing. And then lastly, and this has been really important, is one Zoetis. Our competition is outside the walls of this company. Together, we are one Zoetis, and we will succeed together, and we are here to support each other. So I would say that was sort of the history of where they come from. And I would be surprised if almost every colleague you meet at Zoetis can't spew those off very quickly.
I love that. Customer obsessed, run it like you own it, always do the right thing. Our colleagues make the difference. We are one Zoetis. That is wonderful. And it certainly does have a commonality and a theme throughout the entire organization. So I want to just remind our audience that we are listening to Defining Leadership as a First-Time CEO with Kristen Peck, CEO of Zoetis. The topics we cover, like today's, are all current, and a new topic with a new game changer is released on the third Thursday of every month. This is a great way to stay current on relevant issues happening around us. Now let's return to Kristen Peck. So Kristen, pivoting during the pandemic was a challenge for all corporate leaders. And there are some best practices that have been put in place by other companies, including yours. So what do you see as continuing post-pandemic, which we hope will happen very soon?
Yes, it's a great point, Janice. I sincerely hope that we can take some of the lessons learned and apply them forward. It would certainly make some of the pain we suffered a lot more worth it, I would say. The first I would say was really empowering our local leaders. I think we thought we did that, but given how differently the pandemic evolved in different markets around the world, we really saw the great agility that empowering our local leaders allowed us to adapt to local market conditions or local site conditions, to be honest. So I think this is one of those where we need to think of new ways that we can give global guidance, but empower our local leaders to act because their markets really were different. I mean, as you look at China today, it's a very different situation than being in the UK. So global guidance and how we're going to approach things when China is largely back to business as usual and you have a lockdown in the UK. So we really learned that. And I think we're looking at new ways of applying that and to reimagine, things like your supply chain, product launches, and really thinking about empowering our local leaders even more than we thought we were. The second is that virtual engagement was more effective, honestly, than we thought it could be. I think there are significant opportunities now to bring more virtual engagement into the relationships we have. I personally really miss the ability to see my customers in person and to see my colleagues in person. And I don't really think there's any replacement for that. But I don't think that I need to be on a plane as often as I was in the last few years for every meeting with every customer. Nor do I think our customers are going to expect that anymore. So I think it's about understanding the right mix between in-person and virtual and better leveraging that for both, not just a cost issue, an effectiveness issue, but a well-being issue. As even as we look at, what does the future of our workplace look like and, how do we adapt some of those? So I do think the learning of virtual engagement has been one. And the last one I think all companies are grappling with was, what does an agile, efficient supply chain look like in the future? I think we're starting to realize that maybe some of our supply chains were too lean, to be honest with you, didn't have enough redundancies. And these ideas of black swans or pandemics or things like that may come up more often. And how should we think differently about inventories and about redundancies? So I think, we are really looking at investing in ways to create a more flexible model for us across our supply chain.
Leaders can't be all places all the time, and particularly when you're running a global company such as yours. So when you look at these lessons that you've learned and you've got people all over the globe, what has made you a better CEO in terms of empowering those leaders and reimagining your whole role as a CEO?
The first, one for me over the last year is being more personal and empathetic, and I would say more vulnerable. I think it allows us to bring more humanity into leading our teams. The one thing about everyone seeing into your homes, into your kitchens, sometimes into people's bedrooms is you see a different side of leaders. And I think that, the pandemic sort of made it an expectation that leaders would be more personal and empathetic. And I'm grateful that I don't think this is going away. I think colleagues and customers, they want to feel you understand, that you appreciate their personal and professional lives, and that, there's a balance. I think in the olden world, it's almost like we didn't have families or pets or children. We were just at work. We were at work, and at home, we were at home. And I think it's pretty hard to argue that right now. I think we're all on calls. I mean, I'm a mother and a wife, and you see my children come through every once in a while, or my dog's barking, and that's just reality. But we've also seen so many families face different challenges. Some of my leaders with small children. And I think being able to understand that, to empathize, and to be more flexible about how we manage our colleagues is incredibly important. At least for me, I felt like over the last year, it's been helpful for our colleagues to see me as a mother and see me, in my home and the things that I have to balance too, and to share that. And so I've been really careful, as I talked about before, to make sure that I am listening two-way to what's going on in colleagues' lives, that I'm noticing those things. And then if I feel someone's having a challenging day, that I'm reaching out. And I think some of that vulnerability, colleagues didn't want to show it and leaders didn't. But I think, being able to do that more, I think is going to be incredibly important, and over communication. I have found that people need to hear multiple messages and communicating on things, honestly, that I don't think CEOs always did. Some of these issues around well-being are ones that I don't think CEOs were always comfortable doing, but I think it's never been more important. I think it's actually one of the greatest challenges corporations and, organizations have moving into 2021 is how are we going to support our colleagues, our customers, and our communities through the next, 6 to 12 months.
The compassionate leader has really risen to the top. He or she has made a major difference, I know, and when we're placing executives into companies, that they want to see that leader has listened to their people, that they have shown their personal side, that they have been a little bit vulnerable, just as you've been chatting about, because you do connect better with people when they can see you as a whole person. As you said, you want people to bring their whole person to work. And so this has been a bit of a silver lining. I think it's brought people closer together, particularly with the leadership of companies. I want to touch on what's happened in this nation beyond the pandemic, but into the social and racial unrest. And so what do you see as the role of CEOs and business leaders that they can play in these societal issues?
I think you're right, Janice. I think that people's expectations of business leaders have really changed over the last few years. And I think they've changed for the good. I think there's an expectation now that colleagues want to work with companies who share their values, and they want to work for companies that shape and serve a social purpose in addition to the business purpose. And you're seeing this really come out around many of these social issues globally. The solutions to so many of the challenges we're talking about around equity and inclusion that you mentioned previously, these are problems that require multiple stakeholders to engage, where you have to find a way of identifying a common ground. And I think corporations are part of this. If you're going to create greater equity of opportunity in the US, you need corporations. You need to think about jobs. We need to think as a business in animal health, how do we create more equity of opportunity around the health of pet owners of different backgrounds? So I do think in every business, you need to think about first, what are those social issues that are really important to my colleagues? What are the ones that are important to my customers and therefore my communities? And what's the unique role the company can play and that each of us as CEOs can play? And I think what you've seen over the last year are, some of my fellow CEOs really stepping up and talking about the role of the company. And I think there's an expectation from colleagues that leaders are going to speak up on some of these issues. And it's not to be partisan, but it's to say, I share your values. These are important things. And Zoetis as a company, or whatever the company is, can contribute to improving this issue. And I do think this is going to be an expectation going forward of corporations. And I'm, certainly proud as a CEO, on behalf of the many CEOs that are doing this, to be able to have a voice on this and to be able to make a difference.
Do you see this as a momentum, not just a moment in time?
I absolutely see it as momentum. And I think it's a changing expectation, to be honest.
And I think as more speak up and you go into different groups and talk about these issues, more social change will happen. And then also as you hire people into your boardrooms and into the companies themselves. So switching a little bit now to food supply and sustainability. What are the plans that Zoetis will put in place in that regard for the world?
Sustainability, to your point, is incredibly important. It is back to what we were just talking about. One of the values that I think matters to our colleagues, matters to our customers, and matters to our communities. It's always been, we talked throughout this podcast about our purpose as a company to nurture the world and humankind by advancing animal care. So we're fortunate to start with, as you think about sustainability and food supply, that our business purpose, is really a social purpose and it speaks to many people. And we've always sort of done this in the background. But one of the things that I've been focusing on with my leadership team is to formalize those strategies that we've had over the last few years in some of those programs and to start measuring. Because, very much as I said to you on diversity, equity, inclusion, we had it, but did we measure it? Did we publish it? So we were the first animal health company to issue a comprehensive ESG review based on the leading frameworks out there. And in the end of the first quarter of this year, we're also intending to share our long-term targets for each of the key ESG components. And as a company, we go back to where do we think we contribute to some of these environmental, social, and governance issues. And we've created 3 pillars where we think we really uniquely contribute. The first is around care and collaboration, and this is around our colleagues, our customers, and our communities. Certainly in natural disasters, Zoetis plays an incredible role in product donation, bringing veterinary care to both wild animals, livestock, you name it. The second pillar is around innovation in animal health. This is critical because 70% of the infectious diseases that affect humans are zoonotic. They have an animal origin. So ensuring that we can be innovating to create, better efficiency and more sustainable farms, but also address some of the real infectious diseases in animal health has a huge impact on human health as well. And lastly, it's protecting the planet, making sure the way we operate our business from whether that's, from carbon, from water, you name it, that we're improving that year after year. And so we put those where we stand on all of the different metrics that are relevant to our investors and our stakeholders. We gave a 3-year look back about a quarter ago. And by the end of this quarter, we're going to publish what our targets are. We think, again, this is one of the changing expectations, and you and I have been talking about, of corporations to be more transparent about their values and how they're going to measure that. And one of those certainly for us is to do the right thing, which is around certainly environmental, social, and governance issues.
Could you repeat that number, 70%?
Yeah, 70% of infectious diseases are zoonotic. In other words, they can move from one species to another.
That's incredible.
Well, certainly as you look at the pandemic we're facing, it was certainly zoonotic. So.
It was. No, but it's incredible. 70%. That's so what you're doing in the innovation of animal health is so important to, like you said, the planet and our well-being and public health throughout the entire world. So you are one of less than 40 female CEOs in the S&P 500 and Fortune 1000, which is disturbing to me because I think that half of corporations should be run by women. But as one of less than 40, looking at your background, your career, you are a role model for other women. You stayed the course, and you even call yourself a frustrated optimist, which I do understand. But tell us what that means and your advice to women in terms of who want to aspire to be a CEO.
I do call myself a frustrated optimist, and some people love it and some people don't really get it. And what I guess it means is anyone who knows me knows I'm an optimist at heart. I think part of that is just, believing for a brighter future. It's also believing in positive intent. I believe there's always a better way that we can do things. And I don't think, we should just accept the status quo as good enough. The world is constantly evolving. The needs and expectations of our colleagues, of our customers are constantly changing. And so I think having an attitude that's positive, that sees the challenges we face as opportunities, sees the uncertainty in situations, again, as an opportunity, is really important. And I think as a woman, I'm optimistic throughout my career that I could achieve more and get there, and that I wasn't going to be comfortable or happy with just wherever I was. So I think about it both personally in my own development as a leader, as a mother, as a wife. But I think it's really important for organizations as well to never just accept the status quo, to constantly be looking at how they can provide better experiences, greater innovation. So it is pretty fundamental to the way I think about my leadership.
And so advice for women who want to aspire to be a CEO, you stayed the course, you're in a field that you're passionate about. What would be some words you would say to them, to these women who want to be a CEO and are maybe in a C-suite now or not, but to aspire to that level?
First and foremost, my advice is do something you love because you'll work so much harder at it. I think what's challenging for many women, and certainly was for me, is that if I'm ever asked to choose between my children and my family and my job, my children and my family will always win. But as many people have heard me say, my husband changed the way I thought about 7 to 10 years ago. When I was offered a big opportunity, I came home and said, I don't know if this is going to be possible. I mean, how am I going to manage my 2 children and, all these responsibilities? And he said to me, I think you're asking the wrong question. Instead of asking if, ask how. How can we as a family, how can we as a team at work, how can me and my manager make this happen? And I think if more women ask the question how, then ask the question if, there's little they can't accomplish. So if you do what you love and you believe that you will find a way, you're a frustrated optimist that it will work out and there is a way if I just think differently about this challenge, there's really very little, I think, that women and men cannot achieve.
I totally agree with you. And you have to have just many contingency plans in place for when things go wrong, whether
that is for sure.
Right? Business or at home. And so again, I think through this pandemic, we've learned that you can't separate the personal from the professional. And if you bring your whole person to work and you understand those issues that are troublesome on either part, be a compassionate leader, you can make a difference for all people's lives. So thank you for sharing that. So what parting words would you have of advice to our audience?
Well, I think from a leadership perspective, I would encourage people to be frustrated optimists. I do think there's a bright future. There are certainly lots of challenges and uncertainty, but really those are opportunities for each of us to think of new ways to innovate and to delight our colleagues, our customers, and our communities. But as you look at 2021 and beyond, given sort of what we're facing this year, I think it's really important that we find ways to create more flexible and agile organizations, because there is still great uncertainty, and the ability to empower our leaders and to pivot quickly has never been more important. If you look at some of the changes in consumer behavior over the last year that no one could have fathomed, and it means organizations just need to be a little more flexible. But the big thing that I am focused on at Zoetis, and I think leaders need to focus on, is it's not all about efficiency. That at the end, humanity is incredibly important. Customers and colleagues will stay with companies they think value the human interaction. So I hope we don't get to a world where everything becomes virtual and online, because at the end of the day, I think so much of the value that we can provide each other is some of that human interaction, whether it has to be on video today, but that, companies become more agile, but we never forget about the humanity of our colleagues, our customers, and our communities.
Well, that's great advice. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your extraordinary career and experiences. You truly epitomize strong leadership at Zoetis. And you have a model there of core beliefs and values that are truly driving positive behaviors, which have resulted in positive results. And I'm just going to remind our audience of those core values again, because they really did resonate with me. Zoetis' core values are customer obsessed, run it like you own it, always do the right thing. Our colleagues make the difference. We are one Zoetis. So thank you, Kristen Peck, for joining me today. And thank you to our audience for tuning into another game-changing conversation on Leadership Reimagined. You can find me on Twitter, LinkedIn, or visit our website at elligroup.com. Stay tuned for more exciting episodes of Leadership Reimagined, game-changing conversations released on the third Thursday of every month and available on my website. Kristen Peck, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much, Janice.